They laughed at me. My own family said I was wasting my time. My friends called me crazy. But today, those same people are begging me for a chance to work with me. My earliest memory of ambition was sitting by the window of our tiny apartment, staring at the world outside, imagining a life where I built something of my own. While most of my friends dreamed of glamorous jobs or safe government positions, I dreamed of creating a business that reflected me, something unique, something that mattered. I didn't want to just exist. I wanted to build, to create, to leave behind something that would live longer than my own days. But when I finally gathered the courage to say it aloud, the laughter that followed still echoes inside me. It was a family dinner. The room smelled of masala. The television played some melodrama in the background, and my father casually asked what I wanted to do after finishing college. My cousins smirked even before I answered because they expected me to say something ordinary, something predictable. But I straightened my back, smiled, and said with all the honesty in my heart, I want to start my own business. The reaction was instant. My uncle choked on his food, my aunt burst into laughter. My cousins looked at me as if I had told the world's funniest joke. My father frowned. My mother shook her head, and the entire table buzzed with mocking comments. Business? You? Beta? People like us don't do business. We do jobs. Don't waste your time with foolish dreams. Girls should think practical. First earn enough for your marriage, then talk about business. Each word cut deeper than the last. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't bother me, but inside I felt my cheeks burning. My cousins laughed the loudest. I excused myself and locked myself in my room that night, staring at the ceiling with tears threatening to spill. But here's the strange thing about pain. It either breaks you or fuels you. And in that moment, I made a quiet promise. If the world believed I couldn't do it, then I would make sure I did it. Not just for me, but so that the laughter I heard that evening would turn into stunned silence one day. I started small. I scribbled ideas in my worn-out notebook. I read late into the night about entrepreneurs who began with nothing but built empires. I watched videos, read articles, wrote plans. The dream inside me grew like a stubborn seed pushing through cracks in the pavement. Yet every time I shared even a fraction of my idea, people dismissed me. Friends called me unrealistic. Professors said I lacked the discipline. Strangers smiled politely, then whispered behind my back. And my own family kept repeating the same line, be sensible. But my heart wouldn't let me quit before even starting. I wanted to see what would happen if I gave this dream everything I had, even if the world laughed, even if I stumbled, even if I fell. Because one truth kept whispering to me louder than their laughter. You'll never know unless you try. Would you still chase your dream if everyone laughed at you? The first step is always the hardest because it feels like stepping into the unknown with nothing but your own heartbeat as a guide. For me, it began with gathering knowledge. If no one believed in me, I had to at least believe enough to prepare myself. I spent late nights in the college library flipping through dusty business books, taking notes until my fingers ached. During the day, while others chatted about weekend plans, I was sketching designs and making lists in my notebook. I didn't have money, I didn't have support, and I didn't even have a proper plan. But I had an idea, something small yet powerful. I wanted to start a little handcrafted products business, things that carried a personal touch, items people could gift with love. I believed in it because I had seen how people craved uniqueness, something real in a world filled with mass production. I remember the first time I told a close friend about my plan. She smiled politely, then laughed softly as if I was being childish. Ananya, do you know how much money businesses need? Do you think just making a few cute things will make you rich? Be realistic, Yar. Her words stung, but I nodded, pretending she was right, even though my heart whispered otherwise. The financial reality hit me quickly. I checked my bank account, barely enough for monthly expenses, let alone starting something new. I thought maybe I could ask my parents for a loan, but the moment I mentioned it, my father looked at me with such disappointment that I couldn't bear to continue. Stop dreaming, he said flatly. Do a job first. Earn something. Don't waste your life chasing fantasies. It was as if every door was shutting before I could even knock. But there's something stubborn inside me that refuses to die. I realized if I couldn't find a way, I had to make one. I started saving small amounts from the little pocket money and tutoring fees I earned. Some days it was 10 rupees, other days 20. I cut back on eating out, skipped movies, even avoided buying new clothes. Each coin, each note I saved, felt like a brick in the foundation of my dream. Yet the world noticed. Relatives whispered at weddings, see, she thinks she's going to be a businesswoman. She can't even afford new sandals. Friends joked, boss lady in the making, right? My heart ached, but I smiled through it all. I reminded myself that ridicule was free. Anyone could hand it out. But dreams had a cost. And I was willing to pay every rupee, every tear, every sleepless night. Sometimes I wondered if I was crazy. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was chasing an illusion. But then, in the quiet moments, when I sat alone with my notebook full of sketches, I felt alive. And that feeling was enough to push me forward. Have you ever had an idea no one believed in? The more serious I became about my dream, the louder the laughter around me grew. At first, it was little jokes here and there, but soon it became a constant echo that followed me everywhere. At home, my parents grew restless. My mother tried to reason with me gently. Ananya, why put yourself through all this? You're young, you can still get a good job, or maybe think of settling down. Don't waste your prime years. My father was harsher. Enough with this drama. Do you think business is a game? Do you think money grows on trees? Stop embarrassing us with your foolish talk. The word embarrassment hit me the hardest. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me, they felt ashamed of me. I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded, and went back to my room. But when the door closed, I let the tears flow freely. Friends weren't kinder. They stopped calling me to outings because they knew I wouldn't spend money. And when we did meet, the jokes never ended. Here comes Madam CEO, they teased, Soon you'll have a multinational company, right? The sarcasm was sharp, but what hurt most was the way they looked at me. Not with respect, not even with love, but with pity. Relatives were worse. At family functions, they would surround me, pretending to ask kindly, but every word dripped with mockery. So, Beta, how is your big business going? Sold anything yet? Ari, don't worry. You can still get married to a nice boy who earns enough. Some dreams are not meant for people like us. You'll understand one day. Their laughter rolled through the room like thunder. I smiled, held my head high, and walked away each time. But inside, I felt like a storm was tearing me apart. Nights became my refuge. When everyone else slept, I sat by my desk, drawing, planning, dreaming. I whispered to myself, one day they will see. I clung to those words as tightly as a drowning person clings to air. Still, the isolation was brutal. My phone barely buzzed anymore. No invitations, no encouragement, no companionship. I carried my dream alone, and some days the weight was unbearable. But I reminded myself that loneliness was better than giving up. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. I could already see my dream taking shape, even if only in my mind. And I believed something else too. Sometimes the world laughs the loudest right before you prove them wrong. Who do you think mocked her the most, family or friends? Dreams are beautiful, but they demand sacrifice, and mine demanded more than I thought I had. Since I had no financial support, I had to earn every rupee myself. That meant taking whatever work came my way, even if it had nothing to do with my dream. I began tutoring children after college hours. At first, it was only 2 students, then 4, then 6. I spent evenings drilling multiplication tables and grammar exercises, while my mind secretly floated to designs of packaging and marketing strategies. The money was small, but it was something. On weekends, I worked at a cafe near the bus stand. I wiped tables, carried trays, smiled at strangers who didn't even notice me. My back ached, my feet hurt, but every time I slipped a few notes into the little envelope marked Dream Fund, I felt alive. Sometimes I took on small freelancing jobs too, designing flyers for local shops, typing assignments for seniors. I said yes to everything. My days blurred into a routine of exhaustion, but I told myself that each drop of sweat was an investment into my future. Of course, people noticed my struggles. Some relatives smirked. See? This is what happens when you don't listen. Look at her running around like a servant, friends whispered. She thinks she's a businesswoman, but look at her carrying plates in a cafe. I heard it all. I pretended I didn't. I smiled politely, nodded quietly, and inside, I turned every insult into fuel. If they wanted to laugh, let them. I would use their laughter as bricks to build my empire. There were nights I returned home so tired that I could barely walk up the stairs. My mother would look at me with worried eyes, but say nothing. My father shook his head in disappointment each time he saw me count coins at my desk. Yet I pressed on. Slowly, my savings grew. It wasn't much, but it was enough to experiment. I bought raw materials, simple tools, a secondhand sewing machine. I worked late into the night making small handmade products, bags, pouches, decorative pieces. Each creation felt like a piece of my soul stitched into fabric. The first time I sold something, it wasn't even about the money, it was about validation. A small shopkeeper bought 3 of my items to resell. When I placed the notes into my envelope that night, I cried. Not because of the amount, but because for the first time, I knew this wasn't impossible. Still, the road ahead was long. One small sale didn't make me a success, but it was proof, a spark, a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are enough to keep the fire alive. What's harder, lack of money or lack of support? The first time a stranger bought my product, something shifted inside me. Until then, I was working on faith alone. Faith that someday all the sleepless nights and endless labor would amount to something. But when that customer smiled and said, "This is beautiful, did you make it yourself?" I felt like the universe had whispered back, "Yes, keep going." I began with small local markets. My stall looked modest compared to the bigger shops, but I decorated it with colors, lights, and all the warmth I carried in my heart. I sat there nervously as people walked past, glancing but not stopping. My palms were sweaty, my throat dry. Then an old lady paused, touched one of the handmade bags, and asked for the price. My voice trembled as I told her. She nodded, paid, and walked away carrying something I had created with my own hands. That night, I held the money as if it were gold. It wasn't just currency. It was proof. Proof that my work had value. Proof that my dream wasn't foolish. Proof that even if the world laughed, there were people who would appreciate what I offered. The next few weeks brought more small victories. A college student bought 2 items for her friends. A young mother loved my decorative pieces and asked if I could make more for her daughter's birthday. Slowly, word of mouth began to spread. Every time my phone buzzed with a small order, my heart leapt. Of course, the mockery didn't stop. Some relatives scoffed. "So how many crores have you made now?" Friends teased, "Don't forget us when you're the next Jeff Bezos." Their laughter was still sharp, but for the first time it didn't pierce as deeply, because I finally had something real to hold onto. What amazed me most was how much I changed. The shy girl who once cried alone in her room was now bargaining with vendors for better raw material prices, confidently explaining her products to customers, and smiling at strangers without fear. Each tiny win built a layer of strength inside me. Yet even in the joy of small victories, challenges loomed. Supplies were expensive, profits slim, and I was still juggling tutoring and cafe shifts to keep things afloat. Some days I questioned whether these tiny wins would ever add up to real success. But each time doubt crept in, I reminded myself, small steps still move you forward. And deep down, I knew something bigger was waiting. These wins were just the beginning. Would you work odd jobs to fund your dream? Success is sweet but fragile, and I learned that the hard way. After those first wins, I felt unstoppable. I believed the hardest part was over. But life has a way of testing you right when you begin to hope. It started with a supplier. I had finally saved enough to place a slightly bigger order of materials. I was excited because it meant I could create more, sell more, and maybe even scale up a little. The man who supplied the fabric promised me a good deal if I paid in advance. Trusting him felt like a risk, but I thought business required bold steps, so I handed over a chunk of my hard-earned savings. Days passed, then weeks. The materials never came. His phone went silent. His shop shuttered. He had disappeared with my money. I remember sitting on my bed staring at the empty envelope where my savings once lay. It felt like someone had ripped the ground from under me. Months of sleepless nights, double shifts, aching feet, all vanished into a stranger's pocket. I cried until no tears were left, but that wasn't the end. Around the same time, my small sales started slowing down. A new shop opened nearby, bigger, flashier, with cheaper, mass-produced items. Customers who once admired my work now walked past to buy from them. My little stall sat lonely while I forced myself to smile at people who didn't even glance my way. And of course, the laughter returned louder than ever. Relatives heard about my struggles and couldn't resist their, "I told you so." See, business is not for everyone. Beta, we only wanted to save you from this heartbreak. Just stop this nonsense before you lose everything. Their words felt like daggers. My father shook his head each time he saw me dragging my tired body home from another failed day. Even my mother, who had stayed silent until then, finally whispered, "Maybe you should stop before it destroys you." For the first time, I almost believed them. I lay awake night after night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was chasing an illusion. Was I stubborn or stupid? Maybe the world was right. Maybe this dream wasn't meant for me. Giving up suddenly looked easier than fighting. But then, in that darkness, another voice rose inside me, a whisper reminding me why I began. I hadn't started to impress anyone. I hadn't started because it was easy. I started because the fire inside me wouldn't let me settle for less. And even if the world laughed, I couldn't betray that fire. I wiped my tears and sat back at my desk, staring at the scraps of fabric and paper left behind. My dream wasn't dead yet. It was wounded, yes. But maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to heal it. Have you ever felt tempted to give up? Sometimes the deepest fall forces you to discover your strongest wings. After losing money to the supplier and watching my stall gather dust, I felt broken, but not finished. Something inside me refused to let failure be my ending. I decided to start again. Smaller, smarter, sharper. No more blind trust, no more rushing. I spent hours researching new suppliers, visiting local markets myself, bargaining face-to-face instead of paying in advance. It was exhausting, but I reminded myself that every scar was a lesson. One evening, while tutoring, I noticed how fascinated my student's mother was with the pouch I carried. It was something I had stitched from leftover scraps just for myself. She asked where I bought it. When I told her I made it, her eyes lit up. "Can you make me a few? I'd love to gift them." That small order reignited my fire. Word spread among her friends. Suddenly, I was getting custom requests. Not mass sales, but special ones. Personalized, thoughtful, unique. And that was exactly my strength. Slowly, I carved a niche. While others sold cheap, I sold meaningful. Customers began returning not just for the products, but for the story. They loved that each item was handmade with care, not churned out by a machine. Then came a turning point I'll never forget. A local NGO invited me to display my work at their women's exhibition. The stall fee terrified me. It was almost all the money I had left, but something inside whispered, "Take the risk." I worked day and night preparing. My hands blistered from stitching, my eyes burned from lack of sleep, but when the exhibition day arrived, my little stall glowed with color, hope, and determination. People stopped, asked questions, touched the products with admiration. Some bought small pieces. Some placed bigger orders. A woman who ran a boutique praised my designs and offered to feature them in her store. That moment felt like sunlight breaking through a long, stormy sky. For the first time, I wasn't chasing customers. They were coming to me. At home, my father still said nothing, but I caught him once looking at the articles I brought back from the exhibition. My mother quietly tucked one of my handmade purses into her wardrobe. They didn't cheer, they didn't clap, but I could sense something shifting. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it wasn't rejection either. And that was enough, because now I had proof. Proof that even after the worst fall, I could rise. Proof that my dream had a pulse, a heartbeat, a future. Who do you think will regret doubting her first? Momentum is a magical thing. For months, I had been dragging myself uphill, pushing a boulder that felt impossible to move. But once it started rolling, even a little, the energy grew on its own. After the exhibition, more doors began to open. The boutique owner who admired my work placed a bulk order. Her customers loved it, and soon she called me again, asking for more. That single opportunity doubled my confidence. Then came something I hadn't even dreamed of, social media. One of my younger customers posted a photo of my handmade bag on Instagram with the caption, "Made with love by Ananya Creations." Within days, strangers were messaging me, asking how they could buy one too. I had no website, no system, but I scrambled to respond to every DM. Slowly, my small circle widened. Soon, I was working on orders late into the night. The once silent phone now buzzed constantly. I could barely keep up, but each notification felt like music. Then came the real explosion. A local newspaper ran a feature about young entrepreneurs in the city, and somehow my name was on the list. The article highlighted my journey from being mocked to building something of my own. The next morning, my inbox overflowed. New customers, invitations to fairs, even a few investors curious about my plans. And suddenly, the same people who once mocked me were whispering a new word, respect. At markets, relatives who had laughed at me stopped by my stall, pretending they had always believed. Friends who once excluded me now called, asking to catch up. Even neighbors who never noticed me began to ask how my business was doing. I won't lie, it felt good. Watching their eyes widen, hearing their voices soften, seeing the envy hidden in their fake smiles. It was like a balm on old wounds. But more than revenge, what filled me with joy was the realization that my dream had finally taken form. My father still didn't say much, but one evening I overheard him telling a neighbor, "Yes, that's my daughter's work. She's doing well." My heart swelled. That single sentence meant more than any applause. The laughter that once haunted me was now replaced with clapping hands and curious questions. And though I knew challenges still lay ahead, I also knew this. No one could ever again call my dream impossible. Because it was no longer just a dream, it was real. Do you think success is the best revenge? Success has a strange way of turning enemies into admirers and doubters into opportunists. The same people who once mocked me now returned with new masks. Smiles instead of sneers, flattery instead of criticism. Relatives who had laughed the loudest at weddings now called to say, "Beta, we always knew you had potential." Some even hinted at introducing me to business contacts as if they had been part of my journey all along. I listened politely, nodded, but inside I remembered every joke, every smirk, every dismissive word. Old friends reached out too. The ones who had left me out of outings because I couldn't spend money now wanted to meet for coffee. They slid compliments into conversations. "You're such an inspiration. We're so proud of you." I smiled, but I knew the truth. Pride had never been in their hearts, only disbelief, until the proof shone too brightly to ignore. The most surprising of all was my father. One evening, he asked me to sit with him. His voice was hesitant, almost awkward. "Ananya, I may not have understood your dream before, but now I can see you're serious and you're doing something meaningful. I'm proud of you." Those words hit harder than every insult I'd ever heard. I had craved his approval for years, and though it came late, it mattered more than I could admit. My mother's eyes sparkled quietly beside him, as if she had been waiting all along for this moment. But here's the truth, I realized. Success wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. Their apologies, their sudden kindness, their attempts to rewrite history, none of it mattered as much as the fire inside me that had never died. Still, I couldn't ignore the irony. Some of the same relatives who once mocked me now asked for discounts on my products. A few even hinted at jobs for their children in my growing business. I treated them kindly but firmly. I wasn't bitter. I simply refused to forget. Because every laugh, every doubt, every insult had shaped me. They had forced me to grow stronger, sharper, and more determined. Without their disbelief, I might never have fought so hard. Standing in my small but thriving workshop, surrounded by products I once only dreamed of making, I realized something important. Sometimes the best answer to laughter isn't anger or revenge. It's success so undeniable that it silences every voice. And in that silence, you finally hear the only voice that truly matters, your own. What would you say to those who laughed at you? The day I hung the bright sign outside my little store, my hands trembled, not with fear, but with a joy so fierce it almost hurt. The letters glowed in the evening light. Ananya Creations. A name that had once existed only in my scribbled notebooks now stood tall on real walls. I stood outside for a long moment, just watching people walk in and out. Customers browsed, smiled, purchased, and left carrying pieces of my dream in their hands. The air inside buzzed with life, with energy, with possibility. I thought back to the beginning, the night I first announced my dream at the dinner table, the laughter that followed, the long days of tutoring and cafe shifts, the sting of betrayal by a supplier, the tears I shed in silence. Every moment replayed like a film, and I realized something. Without those storms, I wouldn't be standing here in the sunlight now. My father visited the store the next day. He didn't say much, but he walked slowly around, touching the products, nodding quietly. Finally, he looked at me and said, "You did this, all on your own." It wasn't an elaborate speech, but those words filled my heart more than any applause could. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "I always knew." Relatives and old friends came too. Some carried pride, some carried envy, but none carried laughter anymore. Because laughter had no place here, not when the dream they mocked had grown strong enough to stand on its own. And me? I didn't feel anger toward them anymore. I didn't even crave their approval. What I felt instead was peace. Because my dream was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was right to believe. Looking around my store, I whispered the lesson life had carved into me. Don't wait for applause. Don't wait for approval. If your heart burns with a dream, chase it. Even if the world laughs, even if the road breaks you, even if you walk alone. Because one day, that same world will see what you saw all along. I smiled as I flipped the open sign that morning. My journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. There would be more challenges, more struggles, more moments of doubt, but I knew now that I could face them. Because I had already faced the hardest battle, the battle of believing when no one else did. And that victory was mine forever. If this were your story, how would it end?